Hey there, welcome to our short web class on how we think IT leaders can turn the chaotic starting point that most of us start with in AI into genuine results, genuine impact. I think a lot of things do start from shaky grounds, unsettled foundations. We've covered and worked on projects where we've seen how things can be done top down rather than from the bottom up. And today I want to leave you with how to define value, the way that we prioritize our ideas. One thing that gets missed out is sure you can put things together, but how feasible are these ideas that come through? And getting the quickest type of feedback loop going so that it's tight and that it's reliable. So it's reliable, we can make better decisions. What this is going to be is, we're going to be creating some assets. There's three that we use. So the first one is their value framework. How do we articulate the value that AI can bring? The second one is the feasibility checklist. So this is a set of systems and processes that we go through to assess how we can answer the feasibility of something. So not whether it is or not, because it's hard to tell. Often in projects, things seem feasible on the surface, and actually you get underneath and the data isn't ready, or the API is shaky, or has rate limits that means you have to come up with new solutions. And so pre-solutioning, running spikes, running short sprints to find the sticking points is something that people miss. Lastly, we're going to use the prioritization matrix, which is simply taking what's feasible, assigning what seems to be the biggest impact, and aligning it with the value framework and your goals. And so this is about, turning it in away from AI for AI's sake and into something that is about business goals. One of the big things that I've seen is that people go for the hanging fruit because we get to play with AI, but that's just burning money. It's like testing any tool and eventually dropping it. It doesn't make sense to the business. So one quick question you can ask yourself now is, out of A, B, D, and C, whereabouts are you stuck? Is it defining clear value to the board? Is it assessing feasibility and getting those tests done from end users or people on the ground using the tools? Is it getting adoption to make sense, or is it setting priorities? And I think that asking yourself those questions might give you a bit more insight into how the rest of this chat might go for you. So why do we think that there are poor decisions being made from people in the governing seat of how AI is going to be adopted in different companies? And I think it comes down to sort of 5 different types of fear. And I think you can see here we've got shiny tools, competition, talent, the board giving very strong opinions, and the general shift of how AI is going to be impacting the world in your industry. All these fears, all these uncertainties lead to short-term decision making to take the pressure off of your back. And it's totally reasonable, right? That's how a lot of us make decisions. Understanding the scope of things allows us to kind of accept them and then move through. So while you've got headlines and people making announcements, and then you've got power users and technical users driving change and wanting more and looking for opportunities to explore this new technology, you also have these other end of the spectrum where they're very scared and very fearful. There's a lot of change management, and that change management can't just be top down completely, although the strategy can be. And hopefully this guide or this web class will help you understand how to shift from bottom up fear and pushing to a top down strategy where you can actually settle a lot of those things. I think one of the clear value props here is that we're supposed to be, top down, not telling people how it is, but showing them what good looks like. So instead of spending ages trying to prompt engineer something and making it only work for themselves, actually taking that and turning it into a pilot and saying, look, what kind of value does it actually have in the business in the future? Is it something that we want to scope out? Has it hit a limitation where actually if we went and explored this as an agent or explored this as an MCP tool, then there'd be more value on that too. And if you ever needed help with that, then we could get involved. So here's all the projects I've done. I've just done a full list of everything that I think stopped us either starting, finishing, or completing on time. And I think that this is normal in new technology, so it doesn't worry me too much. But I wanted to share them with you now just to set the scene. One of the worst ones I've seen is pre-solutioning. So getting to a project and saying, we want to use X to solve Y. And it's like, we want to use ChatGPT to solve our content creation, or I want to, use Descript, which is the tool I'm using to record this, to solve all of our content challenges. As soon as you start to shoehorn, you limit the creative boundaries in some ways, but then you get creative in others because you have to work around the platform. I think another one is, yeah, like I've mentioned, low-hanging fruit fallacy. I think that the number one reason things don't feel like they work is because not enough people are using them. There isn't enough value to be had, and everyone in the business isn't feeling the benefits enough. I think that comes down to poor planning and poor alignment with goals. For example, I've seen people creating content plans in ChatGPT. Every time there's a new client or a new content, they have to rework it slightly, saving a bit of time, but spending time learning. But really, there isn't too much that can happen outside that. It's very limited. If you could transform that, you could look at AI as like, well, how does content get planned across the board? And how does it get planned and actually created? Is there a quicker way to get this stuff ideated? Can it connect with ClickUp or my project management board? And will that actually save time and business value? If you think about it from two different departments or two different scenarios, if you're a marketing agency, that could be high value. But if you're a enterprise SaaS platform that has lots of events and podcasts, it does require a bit of dynamic understanding, then maybe the agent should just be limited to sending data around or something. There's nuanced differences that make things more applicable in some ways, less applicable in others, for sure. But yeah, this is kind of the common patterns I see when the things that we try and avoid and actually, pre-encounter and get out. And we hopefully will get this out in the feasibility checklist, most of this stuff, along with the value benchmarks as well. So if I was to round this all up, I would say this was mainly ambiguity of value. Essentially, we cannot assign a rough best guess of value against us investing this much time or spending this much resource in AI. And I think that really importantly, this is always a best guess of an expected value. It is not concrete numbers and fixate on those, because then you start optimizing for the wrong outcome. Generally, the expected value is almost a pathway to knowing you're on the right track, right? It is not a destination as such. And then the second one is understanding feasibility. We talked about a lot already. And in the prioritization discipline, I think that can be not as important as the first two. However, with limited resource and capacity, if your team is getting the wrong feedback loop, they're going to give up early and they might miss something that could have come along later. So that's one of the big things that I've seen. So we've got three different assets. We've got asset A, which anchors value, asset B1, asset B2, which reduces the unknowns and focuses effort. We have to basically build a repeatable process. And so that's what we've done, where we can define value clearly, reduce the unknowns, and prioritize with discipline. Trying to get the team to name business goals against the resource and just put their kind of skin in the game and say, I believe that this will work. I believe this has value. Even just as a concept, it helps to frame what you're trying to achieve, and not just from a process point of view, but more extrapolated, and make everyone accountable to using it. A lot of the projects I've seen that didn't work started from an employee who was pretty adept using AI, but couldn't look outside of their day-to-day. The project they started didn't have wheels, it couldn't last long. When they hit limitations, there was no what next plan, and I think that was always quite dangerous, and that's where a lot of sunk costs come in. The whole goal here is to create credibility and clarity. So when you're talking to your board, when you're talking to your customers, we want to be able to say, look, here's a really clear stance, here's a really credible stance. We've looked at the numbers, we've tried to assess this as best as possible. Here's how we're going to move forward in AI. Avoiding this AI for AI's sake and feeling like it's messy. A lot of companies actually feel pretty lost sometimes when they're trying to explain what they're doing with AI, and hopefully this will help. Okay, so next we are going to be looking at the value framework. We built this mini table. It's very rudimentary, very early, but I'm going to explain what we're doing around here. The first kind of 5 columns are quite obvious. We're setting an AI idea against a goal that we have for the business or the department. And I think that the way I try and see these goals are they should be probably subtasks or sub goals of a larger goal. So the larger goal might be, we need to get to 12 million revenue this year. How do we do that? What are the jobs to be done? We need to increase our amount of qualified webinar leads. I think that sub goal feels a lot better when trying to align AI initiatives, because the overlapping of what needs to be done can be a bit more obvious. The thing that I try and do is, when we're trying to measure performance and stuff, is making sure that we do have a baseline and a target. And the baseline is obviously the numbers that run through your company. The target, I think that can be, again, just what would be amazing. If we can get somewhere near this, then it will be worth it. Based on what the platforms say, or based on the efficiency gains we're roughly calculating in our head, we think we can actually pump out maybe 3 times more content, or we get 3 times the higher quality. And so then what we do is we assign a value to that. The value is the current pipeline of webinar leads, and then timesing it by the amount of difference. And what I've added in here, which I think is really useful, is the success probability, because there is no guarantee that this will work. I took this from poker. You may have aces, but you're going to lose 12% of the time. And so when you have aces, you don't have a 100% guarantee, even though it's the best hand. I think taking this approach will help people frame whether that initiative is useful as well. Success probability is a means to start thinking about your project in terms of risks instead of in terms of binary yes or no. I think that's also another risk mitigation strategy that has successfully helped me stop projects early on that would never have worked, which is really, really useful, And I think, again, this just does set up like a recurring narrative around learning and experimentation as well. Once you start trialing these things, because they should be fairly quick as to whether you're getting to some of these numbers or on the way to those numbers, how accurate you are in suggesting some of the value and success probability. Okay, so now we've looked at the AI framework, here's what we are doing to turn it into something we can actually work with. We have a prompt that does this automatically. It's quite simple, but essentially what we're looking for is how do we now start to unpick what that goal might look like out in the kind of solution zone. And so we've got the mission statement, 90-day action plan, which AI generates itself. These are usually the spike originators where you can refine that, dive into them more. We're looking for little avenues to explore when we put this strategy together. And what this does is, when we centralize this kind of narrative, it allows people to join, be part of it, understand what's going on. A simple table from an IT director's head makes sense, and I know what's going on. I've done the research. However, as a marketing person or a salesperson, I need something more tangible probably to work on. So what we're doing is taking a table and using a prompt to turn it into more of a mission statement and plan to allow our team to be on board more. I think this is a good example of using AI for very simple but effective things. Now, the second framework that I want to leave with you today is feasibility assessment. I'm going to switch the example to invoice processing because that allows for a bit more conversation on, why we need to assess feasibility at a bit more depth than maybe what other people have suggested. I'm also going to show you the Excel worksheet we created to turn AI ideas into feasibility assessments. So I'm going to load that up right now. I'll do lead scoring to keep it consistent. We will do AI lead scoring to keep it consistent. Impact score, I think we can assign this a rough 4. And overall feasibility will be calculated. So what we do now is go through the feasibility scoring, data readiness and quality. I could score a 4. API and integration feasibility, that's probably a 2 using legacy systems. Security, privacy and compliance, we're yet to do that as a company as much. So now I am going to score each of those criterion. Data readiness and quality, I think we can do a 4. We're pretty data centric. API and integration feasibility, I'm going to give this probably a 2, assuming that the lead scoring APIs, it might be old packages, that's an unknown. Security, privacy and compliance, because it's lead data, although we're good at it, I think I'm going to give it a 4. Change management and adoption, this is probably a 2. Talent capacity, yeah, I think this is probably a 4. Cost to deliver and run, I think that's relatively low, so I'd give that a 4 as well. Time to value, that's probably lower on the end of things. Dependencies and vendor risk, measurement and eval feasibility. So can we actually look at the outcomes, measure them? I think that's actually a really high one. So now we've got owners on these and some evidence and links of where we've come up with this. So now I'm going to go do fast triage, I'll delete these, and let's just have a look at what this is. So is there a clearly defined business goal and KPI from the framework guide? Yes. Where does the data live? Do we have the permission to use it? Yes. This is unknown. This is a no. Can we deliver useful MVP in 6 weeks? Yes, probably with LLMs, like rudimentary wise. Budget and license, unknown here. And then derivative scrape, yes, we do. Cool. So again, this is just a quick check of, are we in the right place to even start this campaign? The feasibility scoring here is a bit more in detail. We have to probably go and talk to some people and make sure we are ready. The fast triage is just top of mind. And the risk register, this is a place where we might like to score some risks in terms of, we might want to continue with the project, but there's some big risks here that we probably want to test first. This might be your spike library. You can see here, we have a calculation of their overall feasibility and the amount of triage red flags. The feasibility category is medium here. And so we've got to do time box spike to reduce uncertainty, which makes sense, right? We've got some unknowns. We need to go and figure out what these risks are. So this is how we go and put in some initiatives. And there probably is actually like a prompt that you can do where you speak to ChatGPT, you load in these variables, you speak to it, and you load some transcripts of some calls, and you actually go and do that. Now, once I've got this key part done and I've filled in the details, I'll need to go and assess what kind of spikes I need to look at. We want to make sure we are getting the right data back from all of us, and we want to make sure that we are setting them up so that they are objective and not subjective. It's very easy to say, well, it isn't working, but I just want to push through this. I think the outcome is worth it. It's very important to keep, hard track on this. There are so many avenues you can go down in AI solutions finding, right? And the quicker you find the best win, the quicker you're going to get that feedback loop going and the quicker you're going to see value. We have a good system for this. This works pretty well. And what we do is we then turn it into a impact and feasibility prioritization matrix. So we're going to use quick wins, strategic bets, nice to haves, and avoid. You're going to have so many in strategic bets and quick wins that nice to haves and avoids probably just get moved away. And the whole point of this is that we are trying to align you with longer term goals and improving the business using AI, not just using AI for AI's sake. So you can see here some examples of lead scoring system, looks like a quick win. And quick win might not even be, I think reasonable wins is probably a better term, to be honest with you. So that's what I would go for here. And you can see here, I've got the weighted formula down the bottom. Essentially, I'm trying to make the argument that we are more concerned with impact than we are with feasibility, although something unfeasible doesn't matter what impact it is. You can't implement it, it doesn't matter. So just keeping that in mind as we move forward. We also have another document that can help you with this, a little how-to guide on how to run the feasibility sub-process and the prioritization matrix. So you can see here we've got an example at the bottom and some of the questions and some of the gates that we are running in that Excel. Here's the prompt toolkit that I wanted to show you quickly. Let's imagine we have a spike now. Then I would go and say, hey, I've got this, I need this spike researched. I'll go into ChatGPT, do a new chat, and I'll say, paste this in. We'll do deep research. So context, initiative, I want invoice processing API using LLMs. We are aiming to shave off 50 hours a month manual work. They obviously come up with a few questions, but I'll go send that off and then get the report back. That means that I now have some more information for the spikes and what we want to actually go and do. Another one that I have here is this little technical spike plan and the API reconnaissance prompt as well. These are great for when you're assessing how easy something is to be integrated so that you can connect AI tools or MCP tools. Building up an image and simplifying your research becomes essential, where you almost want to rank the difficulty based on the available paths and URLs. Basically, if an AI agent struggles to find it or struggles to articulate it, one thing I might do here as well is create some boilerplate code and just kind of give it a once over and see if it's relatively decent or looks plausible. But yeah, so that's how we are pulling together information on the spikes that feed into this feasibility and prioritization matrix. So hopefully that was a very brief and useful introduction. Here's what I would say you should do from here. I think you should run an internal workshop and you should get together all the AI initiatives that have been passing throughout the company, top down, bottom up, all over the business, right? Then I want you to get the numbers that currently people, head ofs, boards, managing directors are reporting on, and then based on those numbers and based on how they align with the company goals, go and create the value framework where the value might lie, and then create your first feasibility assessment. Get the spikes in place, and then use the tools that we've given you today to build out the plan, the 90-day plan, and share it with the team on how you're going to be using AI. The resources will be downloadable alongside this video. We'll put them in the description. We are just trying to keep it simple and make sure that your team are all aligned with the right goals, and you're limiting the resources that you spend finding out what AI works and what AI doesn't. If you need help with this, we're more than happy to sit down with you and look at some of the more complicated data-centric AI systems that you might be looking at. One really good case study is when you've got to a certain point in your tools and your AI tools, and it feels like there's a limitation. It feels like people are building workarounds. Then maybe we can come and have a look and build your own system, your own agent, or your own MCP tooling. Hopefully that was helpful, and thank you so much for joining. I hope you found it really useful. Any questions, just hit us up, book a clinic with us, and I'll be happy to help.